right, guys. Thanks so much for tuning in. So today we've got an awesome show because we're chatting with Greg Panora about the champion's mindset. Now, Greg, thanks so much for joining us. Really, really excited to have you on. Can you tell the listeners a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your background, and essentially like why you're here today?
Absolutely. My name is Greg Panora. I am 40 years old. Fuck. I've been powerlifting for about 20 years now, 21 years now, actually. Um, my career, kind of, as far as everybody knows, started at Westside Barbell. I went over there at 25 years old. I broke the world record 7 times. I took the world record from 24:83 or 82 to 26:30. And then I had a massive stroke at 30 years old. Had a brain aneurysm, led to a massive stroke, lost everything, control of the right side of my body. And so for 3 years, I kind of retired from the sport, and I decided to go back into Raw. And at that point, pretty much everyone had forgotten about me, and I kind of had to start back at the bottom. And that's sort of when my career became interesting. I worked myself up to number 3 in the world. I totaled 2102, Raw with no wraps at 275. Went a single ply for a minute, total 2335. So the goal has kind of been to be great at everything. I want to be world class in all kinds of powerlifting, and they're very different, far different than people understand. Mechanics are different. The way I trained was very different. But I think at this point, I sort of mastered them all. I think I could step on stage at a world stage in all 3 types of disciplines, and so that was the goal. Since then, I've gone on to coaching. I spent a long time reading and perfecting, trying to understand the science of this. Because the thing is, just because you're great at the sport doesn't mean that you understand it. When I was at Westside, I was the best in the world, but I couldn't tell you a fucking thing. I was just listening and do what I was told. Which is great for an athlete, but as a coach, you have to understand what's going on. So it took a long time to understand, first of all, why I was good at this, and second of all, how to do this correctly. There's definitely a certain way, ebb and flow, and way this needs to go. And that's the part I think that most people have trouble with is that, because it becomes some instant gratification type of thing in the gym, and it's really not the way it's supposed to be done. So I'm here to teach that now, and that's where my goal is.
That's awesome, man. And yeah, you said something that was really interesting. So like, you were one of the best in the world, but at the same time, you just felt like you didn't necessarily really know how to either communicate that, or you're like, well, why am I the best? I'm not exactly sure. And it's so funny because I had Mike Teixeira on the podcast last week, and we were talking about something pretty similar. How, when I first started being a coach, there was a moment where I realized it was like, okay, I'm getting clients results, but then someone was like, well, what's your system? Like, how do you customize or individualize programs for your athletes? And I was like, I don't know. Like, I couldn't tell you. You know what I mean? Like, it was very much an intuitive process. Like, I knew what to do, but then like to put pen to paper, it was like, dude, I have no idea. And and it's like you said, it's a whole different ball game. Like once you actually have to like coach other people and kind of like communicate these things as well, you're just like, Jesus, it's a whole nother level. So it's funny that you brought that up. So how did you come up into the sport of powerlifting? Like when did you start lifting initially?
So I started lifting weights at 13. What happened was I went to high school a year early, not because I was smart, just because they thought I was ready to go to high school at 13. And so I had been a good athlete my entire life, but when I went there with the high school, the school is for me at the time, a big school. It was scary. The kids that in 8th grade I was the same size as had gone through puberty and grown, gotten a lot bigger and stronger, and so I could not keep up with them. In my last day of football practice, one of the bigger kids threw me on the ground and spit on me. He goes, "Why are you such a fucking pussy?" And I was like, and the senior quarterback had to help me out. He's like, "Leave him alone, man. He's doing the best he can." And it was the most embarrassing thing. It's in front of everybody. It was so embarrassing. And so I went home that day and I said, "Dad, can you help me write a program, a weightlifting program?" And he wrote me a very simple program: bench press, squat, military press, pull-ups, very basic stuff. And I ran it for that year, all through the summer. And at some point during that time, I hit puberty. And so I came back sophomore year weighing about 220. I had a 405 bench press, and it sort of blew everyone's mind. And so at that point, I realized that maybe I'm special. Maybe I have something I can do that
at 14.
Yeah, I had a four.
Jesus.
Let's say 15. At about 15, I had about a 4 or 5 bench press. Yeah. The
Yeah,
funny thing about it was, though, I wasn't the strongest kid in school. We had a
yeah,
kid who was a year younger who had a 455 bench press in top. He was a USAPL lifter. He could bench
that's insane.
455. Yeah.
That's
And
insane.
so, nobody really took it that seriously. But, later on, a few years later, I started reading about Westside Barbell. And it just changed everything for me. That was it. That was like it was like I mean, it was the most moving, magical thing I'd ever seen, and I was like, I need to be part of that. I'm not sure how you do it, but I'm going to figure that out. And from that point on, I sort of stopped caring about sports. I was a good athlete, but I stopped caring about sports
Mhm.
really, or even girls, school. I was like, I just need to be in Ohio, and finally I did it at 25, which is 12 years later. Most people have a dream at 13. At some point, it kind of seems like, I'm gonna give that up and
Yeah,
find new dreams. But I never lost it. It was still always there. And then I did it, and yeah, it's the best thing I ever did.
that's interesting. Like, how much of an impact do you think that incident with the guy who was kind of like bullying you or teasing you, like how much did that actually influence like your either your drive to get started or your drive to kind of persist when you started actually lifting?
It was everything, man. It's all I thought about. You know, the funny thing about it was like that kid grew up too and became actually a really good friend of mine. And
That's hilarious.
but for that summer, man, it's all I did in the gym. I'd work out like 3 hours a day, then run, and then I used to have a tree I would hit like a football player. I would do it for hours at a time.
Yeah,
And so I mean, and I pretend it was him, and it
yeah,
really, 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 And mind you, I grew up in the '90s. '90s were a little bit different
yeah,
than now. Rules
yeah,
weren't quite the same. You could kind of bully kids and nobody really cared. You know what I mean?
yeah,
The locker room showers were insane, like prison lockers.
yeah.
But
That's
I did
hilarious.
everything. Still today, even like I still kind of feel like that little kid sometimes. It still drives
Yeah.
me.
That's crazy because a lot of the people that I talk to who have a big goal, there usually is like an incident like that
Yeah,
where
yeah,
something happened and it's usually negative, you know?
yeah. Of course, yes.
Like for me, I got into boxing, so I fought and did Muay Thai for like
Really.
8 9 years, and yeah, and the reason why I started was actually because I got bullied by some dude who like was kind of an acquaintance. He like I was at my locker and there were all these guys and they kind of like came around me and I was like, "What the fuck's going on?" He like
Yeah.
slapped me in front of everyone and I was so embarrassed and I was really mad that I didn't know what to do.
Right,
And so I
right,
was like,
right.
"Fuck
Yes,
that! It's
exactly.
never gonna happen again." And
Yep.
that's why I started. And I know so many lifters and so many fighters and so many people who have that where it's like something happened and they're like, "I'm not going to be a victim," and then all of a
Right.
sudden you're like,
Exactly.
Jesus, man, you really went with that and ran, and
Exactly.
it's crazy. Now
Exactly.
you have like seven
Yeah.
world records, like
Yeah. Right.
you're kind of like you
Right.
kind of almost want to be like, man, I owe you like a lot of
Yeah.
gratitude actually, you know?
I told him that actually recently.
Yeah,
I still talk to him. And
yeah,
he's become a very, very good human being. I
yeah,
think just at that age, I think he was probably experiencing what he did to me from the older kids.
yeah,
And obviously there's no anger towards him now, but
yeah,
like it really was a driving force for this whole thing to happen. Had that not happened,
yeah.
I'd probably be a normal person. I'm kind of glad I'm not.
Who were some of the people that you really looked up to when you were kind of coming up the ranks, whether
It's
in the
easy.
sport of powerlifting or out the sport of powerlifting?
Well, there was two in the sport of powerlifting. Obviously, Chuck Vogelpool. Chuck was my god growing up. I remember it's kind of a funny story. When I was probably 20 years old, I started dating this girl, and we drove all around like the East Coast looking for that flame beanie. The one that you wore back then.
Yeah,
We
yeah,
drove, we went everywhere looking for that hat. And I finally found one that kind of looked like it, and so I wore it to the comp. And the head judge was like, "Take that goddamn hat off! You're not Chuck Vogelpool." There's like four other guys wearing the same hat. It was great.
yeah.
But yeah,
That's
obviously Ed Cohen too. Ed Cohen is
yeah,
still a huge driving force. I love Ed. Then outside of powerlifting, like it's kind of a funny story. How it's kind of all connected. My father, when I was a little kid, I was probably 5 or 6. He was reading a book about Sir Edmund Hillary, who was the first guy to climb to the top of Everest.
yeah,
And he was telling me how crazy that was and how he was able to do it with no equipment, how much he struggled. And that story always sat with me. It still does today. And I wanted to do something that nobody else had ever done. I wanted to be the best at something, and that was a huge driving force as well. And at first, I honestly thought I was going to be skateboarding. I was a really good skateboarder as a kid,
yeah.
and I ended up going to Cape Cod, if you know Massachusetts. I went to Cape Cod and went skating with a couple of pros. and those guys were so much better than I was. And I was like, oh god, I don't know if I can ever do this. Then it kind of became snowboarding. It was sort of the same thing. I actually got some pretty big sponsorships as a kid, and I was good, but not quite. I don't think I quite had it. Then I started lifting weights,
Mm.
and I was like, yep, that's it. That's it right there. And I
Yeah.
knew almost immediately. I could feel it. I could feel it like in my soul. If that makes
Oh,
sense.
really?
Yeah,
You so
absolutely.
right away you were like,
First time
man,
I touched
this
the
is
weight.
yeah,
Yep. So everybody's on this bench press machine
yeah,
at football, and I went over there and beat everybody. Everybody's like, "What the fuck?" You know? Because I wasn't. I'm actually very genetically a small kid. My
yeah,
family's all runners. My father was a captain of this running team at college, on the
right,
track team. My sister's a marathon runner. My mom's been a lifelong runner.
yeah.
But it just didn't appeal to me.
And you didn't have that with anything else, eh?
No, nothing since really. Honestly, it's
Uh-huh.
always been that. And so I put 100% of my focus in basically on day one. I said, okay, this is it. And I went and bought a bunch of muscle magazines and a bunch of supplements, and went in 100%.
Yeah,
And really never let up. It's still really all I think about.
yeah.
It's kind of funny.
That's crazy. So one of the things that I'm always really interested in is hearing from people like yourself about, what it actually takes, sacrifice, things
Sure.
like that. So Mike Tyson's a huge, I guess, idol of mine, right? Like he's someone I really look
Mine
up
too.
to because one of the big things he talks about is he's like, you have no, what did he say? I remember there's an interview where he's like, you don't want my world. Like you couldn't last 2 days in my world. You don't understand what I have to give up, the
Right.
sacrifices I have to
Right.
make.
Right.
And and I really think that people don't understand the
No.
sacrifices to,
No. They
not
don't.
just to be good, but to like if you really want to stand out.
Right.
And that's something that the more experienced I get in lifting and in like the research that I'm doing as well, the more that I start to look at like, the people at the top and I'm like, holy man, like
Yeah.
you have
It
to cut
takes a
out
lot.
everything.
It
And
takes a lot. Yep.
and so like what did that mean for you? Like what did you actually do? What were some of the big sacrifices that you had to make?
So I live in Maine. And
Mhm.
before I moved out to Westside, I was in Maine. Now Maine's a great state. It's very pretty. A lot of fun stuff to do here. But it's not exactly a place where you're going to be pushed. And
Yeah.
so my first 3 or 4 years were spent here in Maine, competing. And I was a good lifter. I wasn't anything special really. I
Mm.
win best lifter in most comps. But outside of Maine, like I didn't feel like I was overly special. And then so I realized I had to go, and the plan had always been to go out to Ohio. And then I had a chance to do it, and I took it and moved out there. And honestly, my first few months they were absolute fucking hell. Like, now it's a cool story and it sounds like it was awesome, but
Yeah.
it was fucking misery. Every day I was sleeping in my car at 9 o'clock at night. I lived in my car, and so I had no place to go. I we got a couple $100, and I was like, so for me, it meant I had to give up basically all things that human beings get very used to and very comfortable doing. I couldn't take showers. I was starving. Living in my car. And the thing about living in your car is that we were done training by 11 a.m. And then what? Then I'm sitting in my car for the entire day and night.
Yeah.
And so for me, it was that. And it was, I've given up. I've not really been able to get into a relationship where I'm going to marry somebody because this is my focus. It's hard
Yeah.
to be in a relationship where the girl or the guy, depending on, is not the focus. And it becomes a problem every single time. So I had to given up. I've given up a lot of things that people I think take for granted in the daily life. Plus the eating. I eat 7 8 times a day. I have naps planned in. Basically, the big thing you have to do if you want to be good at this is create habits. And the habits don't have to make sense to other people. It just has to make sense to you. My eating times are always the same every day. I will not change them up for anybody. Training is the same. Over 20 years, it's become a lot easier. I feel weird if I'm with somebody and we're driving and I have to eat, we're gonna stop somewhere and eat. And I don't care if they want to eat or don't want to eat. They don't want to go to a fucking Applebee's. They can sit in the car. I'm gonna go
Yeah.
to fucking Applebee's, eat some fucking steak tips. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so for me, it's really just been about creating good habits.
Yeah. And like you said, I think the one thing that's really interesting, um, that I think a lot of the times really gets neglected when we're like just in the conversation about sacrifice in general are the little things that are repeated every single day.
Yes,
Like a lot of the times people think
every day.
sacrifice
Yeah.
People think sacrifice is like this big grand gesture where it's like,
Right.
okay, that's it, I'm moving, and
Right.
it's like
Right.
that's the start of it. And like you said,
Beginning.
every day, a lot of people can't imagine what it's like to be
No.
finished training at 11 a.m. and then have the rest of the day where you're chilling in your car
Nothing.
and all
And
of
the
the
thing about
additional
it
things
too
that come
was
on
that I didn't know anybody either. It's not like I had friends to go ham
there.
with. So I basically sit in my car and stare at the ceiling of my car all day long. It was
Yeah,
a really shitty car too. So
yeah,
it was hard. It was very hard. It was a hard time. I was able to shower once a week. At a little rest stop. And the thing about it was, I don't want to tell anybody. It was embarrassing. I'm homeless. I don't have a place to
yeah,
go. I can't afford to eat. I don't have a job. It was my fault, obviously. I went out there with absolutely no planning. But
yeah,
sometimes in life, you have to do things without planning if you want to be great. And so I watch and I hear it all the time. Local guys, I want to be great. What should I do? Get the fuck out of here, man. Go somewhere else. Go somewhere where great lifters are
yeah,
built. You know. And then look at me like I'm crazy. You obviously can do it wherever you're at, but you're gonna have a much better chance if you're around very, very, very strong fucking people. And so for what at Westside, that was the whole thing. Everybody there is fucking strong. Everybody was great. Nobody was there was even there was nobody even that notch under great. Everybody was fucking phenomenal. And so
hmm
that will make you great. That's what made me great. I wanted to be the best. I was willing to push past what they were doing. And so at the beginning, I was training 3 times a day. So that made it a little bit easier. I was doing a morning workout, which was my big workout, then like 2 smaller workouts after. And also, so the thing too was when I first got out there, I lost a ton of weight. I lost about 15 pounds because I wasn't eating. And so what I would do to eat, because obviously I was starving, is I would go to a grocery store. There's an all-night grocery store almost across the street, and I'd go over there every day, and I'd open up a box of Nutrigrain bars, and I'd walk around the store and eat them and read magazines. And so that became part of my process. But Louis was like, how do you come here and lose 15 pounds? Because everybody puts on 40 pounds. How are you losing weight? And finally, I was like, I'm kind of starving here, man. And so he started taking care of me and getting me food. I was eating at his house and eating breakfast,
hmm
lunch, and dinner with him every day. And so that helped out a lot. But yeah, I mean, you're gonna have to suck, to be good. And that was the thing. You have to do things that are fucking horrible to be great. Excuse my language. Can I swear?
yeah. You can do what you want, man. It's all good.
Okay. Yeah. So I mean, you're gonna have to do some things you don't want to have to. You don't want to do, and that's a big part of it.
Yeah, that was always something that kind of got me as well. Was like how long can you make these sacrifices for? Because it's it's really like whoever is able to lift the longest, stay injury free, and push
Yep.
super fucking hard all the time.
Yep.
Usually, that guy is going to either be at the top or be at least be in the conversation.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely right.
And it's really crazy because like on the one hand, I think absolutely genetics matter. Like,
Yep.
no one who's at the top has inferior genetics.
Oh, of
But at
course.
the same time, I also really think that people dramatically underestimate how far you can get with just super hard work and
Absolutely. No question.
consistency over
No
over
question.
years and years and years.
No question.
So when did you start training at Westside again?
It was in 2005, I think. So I had been lifting for 12 years before that. I actually trained for 7 years before I actually competed because
hmm
I was like I would back in those days I would read everything written about powerlifting, and Louis was pretty adamant about building a base before he started with Westside programming, which is one of the things I'm trying.
Right.
And what I do now on my team looks nothing like Westside, but I
Yeah.
see all these little kids wanting to train Westside, and Louis told me if you're gonna do Westside, you should have a 700-pound squat, a 450 bench, and a 700-pound deadlift. And
hmm
so I see all these little tiny kids, little skinny kids doing Westside. It's like their max lift is a 200-pound, reverse band press. You're not doing enough. There's not enough work there. You basically brought in your groceries. You're expecting it better. Like you need
Yeah.
some volume in there. You need to build some muscle. And so when I first got out the Westside, Louis was like, "You're built like a swimmer." He's like, "You're not built to powerlift at all." He's like, "So
Yeah.
we have to put some weight on you." So my first 6, 8 months there were bodybuilding. He was having me do bodybuilding movements, to build up that base and that size. But I'm not sure where the information has gone because what I'm seeing people do now, it doesn't look like what I was doing. It looks very, very different than what we were doing. So
Yeah, well, I think that's because a lot of the times, like what's communicated about West Side
yeah.
isn't necessarily like what he's actually
Oh,
saying.
of course. None of it, nothing that I see looks anything like what we were doing. It's like it's
Yeah,
completely different.
yeah. Like I honestly find that the more I read into it, like when I first got introduced to West Side, I was like, this is ridiculous. This doesn't make any sense. But then at the same time, I had to be like, bro, just fucking check yourself. Like they got
Yeah.
40 world champions there. Like
Right.
obviously
Right.
they
Right.
know what they're doing.
Right. Right.
But now the more that I guess the more that I train, the more that I'm like, oh wow, like I think it's honestly that most people just aren't smart enough to
Right.
understand a lot of that stuff.
Right.
And
They don't
also,
want
like,
to.
to be fair, Louis is not necessarily the best communicator.
No.
Like, I feel like
Fuck.
he's got so much information in his
This
head,
is
but
insane
he
talking to him.
communicates, and you're just like, wait,
Yes.
what did you just say? Is that even English? Um, but yeah, the dude is crazy smart, that's for sure.
Yeah,
So,
for
so
sure.
what were some of the lessons you learned? Because I mean, like, honestly, training with that many champions and having like you said, no one was even a notch below great. Like,
Right.
what did
Everybody
that
was
do?
great. Right.
What did that do for your mindset and like kind of walking into the gym and
Man.
just your confidence and everything?
So it's kind of funny. My first week there, everybody's getting ready for a comp. So it was my first week there, and a week after that was the Iron House Classic. So none of the lifters were there. So it was me and some old guy who was like Louis' neighbor. And we trained together my first week, and I'm like, "This is
Yeah.
Westside." I'm like, "What the fuck is this?" So I was training with, and we go drink Miller Lights after and grill, and I was like, "This is not what I was expecting at all." And then week
Yeah.
two, everybody came back, and I was like, "Holy shit, where am I?" Like,
Yeah.
you're expected to be great. You're expected to be great. If you're not, I'll just throw you off. And so that's the thing that Westside does that people don't understand is when your back's against the wall, you're gonna be your best, or you're not. And Louis is gonna bring in, especially more so in those days, but he was gonna bring in the best of the best and bring in 10 of them and bring it down to one. So he's kind of able to filter it down to the best. And so what you learn how to do there is compete. You learn that mindset. You learn how to compete. And Louis is very adamant about that you're nothing but a number, and I like that. That sat really well with me. He always like, you're my favorite lifter because you broke multiple records, and I like that. So it made me push for that. All I cared about was winning. I didn't care about anything else. I didn't care about the science of it. I don't want to hear about technique shit. I just wanted to win, and I was able to develop that mindset that way. I was also reading Muhammad Ali's biography right before I came, and that helped me out a lot too. But I mean, what did I? I learned a lot, man. It's like I learned how to. The thing that I see people doing incorrectly in powerlifting is they'll miss the lift and then they'll start crying about it, and their entire meat gets fucking shot. That's when my brain turns on. When I miss the lift, that's where everything goes. I say, okay, now it's fucking time to turn that on. Well, I think that's the hardest part for people to do. I watched a lifters of my team. They miss their second squat, and the entire meet's over. That's it. They're crying in the back, and you can't
Hmm.
be like that. That's when you have to turn shit on. You have to find your way around it. The thing about me when I lift weights, and I think it's different than everybody else, is the entire time I'm lifting that weight, my brain is working 1,000 miles an hour. My brain doesn't stop. It's going through it. It's telling me exactly what I need to do because I've done it so many times. So I mean, what did I learned? I learned how to win. I learned how to win and win all the time. That's the biggest lesson. You
Yeah.
have to learn how to be a winner. You have to develop that winner's mindset.
So that's obviously like a really big contrast, especially nowadays where I find sometimes like, now that I guess good quality information on like training programs, recovery and all this stuff is a lot more accessible. It's really beneficial because now more people have access to it. But then at the same time, I kind of think that there's a little bit of like almost like this benefit of being ignorant to some of this stuff because
Oh
you
yeah,
don't know about the negative repercussions of
right,
overtraining and a
right.
lot of these things,
You're so
and
right.
so you just fucking
Absolutely.
go. And
Yes.
so like a lot of the times nowadays it's really easy to have people being really negative and being like, oh, you shouldn't be doing that, that's too much, or don't do this, it's going
Right.
to hurt your back, or whatever. And so
Right. 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 Right.
how important is it to have people around you, or I guess how important is it to make sure that people aren't around you who either don't support your goals, whether it's friends,
Oh my
family,
God, it's
people
everything.
criticizing you about like your technique or whatever it might be?
It's everything. I mean, you have to be around positive people. And so for me, like when I moved to West Side, one of the biggest, most important things that happened to me is I met a girl, and I met a girl who supported me a lot of times financially, definitely mentally. She pushed me. She was like, you're gonna be the best. And she would tell me that every day, and I was. Then eventually it happened. But her name's Katie, and so thank you, Katie, if you listen to this. Still listen to my podcast. So Katie, if you still listen, to this, thank you. And she was one of my major influences was her. Wasn't a powerlifter, had no interest in powerlifting, but was just one of these very, very driven people. And so I watched how she went through life and kind of copied that and brought it into powerlifting. But you have to be around people that support you. And that was one of the things before I lived out there in Maine was that people weren't really supportive of what I was doing. They kind of make fun of me. You know what I mean? They didn't want to hear about it. And so as soon as I got out there, as soon as people started seeing how good I was, everybody was very, very supportive and had my back. Now, when you start breaking world records, that sort of changes because now you have a target on your head. But it's very, very important. Louis was very, very, very supportive of my stuff. And now I have the same thing with my best friend Swede. Swede Burns. Yeah, I created Swede
Yeah,
Burns.
I
Yeah,
know
he's
the
my best
name,
friend, and
but
he's incredibly supportive of me and me back to him. But you have to be around people that share the same dream, the same passion, and can
yeah,
understand it. Because back in those days, especially when I would tell somebody I'm the best on the planet, they would go, "Yeah, who cares? Nobody gave a shit."
yeah,
My parents hated it. My whole family hated it. I remember I went home for I had broken probably 3 or 4 world records. And I went home, and I went home for like some sort of family reunion type of thing. And one of my uncles looks at me. He goes, "When are you gonna fucking grow up, man?" I'm like, "What do you mean?" He goes, "What you doing is for fucking kids, man." He goes, "Nobody cares." And it really hurt my. I actually got in my car and went drove back. I was like, "Fuck that shit." But
yeah,
there's definitely a lot of that through my life, and there still is. There definitely still is.
yeah,
With girlfriends and things, girls, it seems to be the girls that I meet are sharing the same dream that I'm having. And at this point, I've become very successful doing this. I make a lot of money. Life's not really, my life is pretty set at this point. But especially in those days where, I'd be like, "Yeah, I broke the world record." The first question always is, "How much money do you make?" Like, not much.
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, supportive people are everything.
And so, how do you go about managing those relationships then? Because a lot of the times, people just aren't. Whether it's friends, whether it's family, like, what do you do? Are you just like cut them out?
I will drop you in a fucking heartbeat. In a fucking heartbeat. I will
Mhm.
pack my shit up and walk out of the house and never talk to you
Yeah,
again. Because the second you start getting on me about that stuff, we're done. It's not gonna work. We're
yeah,
done. I won't even say anything. I won't stick around and fight. I'll throw my shit in a bag and leave. I've done it my entire life, and at this point, obviously, I'm 40. I'm single, but I feel like it's probably best. At this point, right
yeah,
now, my goal is to be the best coach on the planet. I know it sounds crazy, but so is being the best lifter on the planet. But again, it's a very, very hard thing to tell people, especially where I'm at now. Maine's a very small community. It's a small state. It's sort of far away
hmm
from everybody else. So it's tough when you tell people you want to be the best in the world. They think you're crazy. And it's probably true.
yeah.
But I'm going to keep fighting.
So that's kind of interesting. You said you wanted to be the best coach. Before I actually go into that, I do have one thing to say about cutting people out. Like,
Yeah.
so I got recruited for a coaching role in Toronto. I'm in Calgary right now, and so I moved there, was working there. COVID happened, everyone got laid off, um, and so now I'm back, kind of for the time being transitioning. But while I was down there, I didn't know anyone, and I was down there for like maybe 3 4 months. And the crazy thing was like not knowing anyone, like that was some of the best training I've ever had in my life.
Yes.
I had
Yes.
zero distractions. I had all the sleep. I had no one being like, because when you tell friends, you're like, "Oh man, like I had a wicked day training." They're like, "Oh yeah, that's really cool," and like you
Yeah.
just tell they don't give a fuck,
They don't
they
give a
don't
shit.
respect it, they don't anything.
No.
It's like I'd rather have someone be like, "I don't care," than
Right.
like play bullshit.
Right.
But
Right.
it was such an eye-opening experience. I was like, "Oh my god, like this is crazy," and how much of a benefit it actually is when you can just like focus and you don't have any of that
Yep.
those people. So like that was something that was a new learning experience for me. You knew
Right.
that I guess since you were like 5 years old, apparently. But coming back to being the best coach, that's a really cool goal. So do you have a way to kind of quantify that?
Um, Not really, but I guess I want to put up. I'm starting to get guys on my team into that world class level. We have maybe 7 or 8 guys. I think this year will squat 900 pounds. We've had multiple guys squat 850 plus range. So I just want to start putting out guys on the map. You know what I mean? We have quite a
Oh,
few
for
guys.
for
I
powerlifting.
train the what's that?
For powerlifting?
Yep, for powerlifting. Yep,
Okay, cool.
I train right now about 900 guys online, girls online.
Jesus
Yeah,
Christ.
all the world.
All
Yep.
you?
What's that?
All you? Or do you have a
All
team?
me. All me. Yep.
Oh
My
my
team's with 900
God.
people on it. Yep.
That's
We're
bananas.
all over the world. Every continent except for Antarctica is represented. We've countries I've never heard of. I coach a
Yeah.
bunch of people in Serbia. I don't know where Serbia is. So it's been amazing.
Yeah.
But I'd like to. I want to be. I want to keep my name in people's mouths. I want
Yeah.
like what we're doing right now. Like this for me. This is my goal now. Is to do as many of these type of things as possible.
Yeah.
I've lifted weights enough. I've won enough comps. I've done enough. Now it's time to talk. I want people to understand how I do this and why I do things the way I do.
Mhm.
Like quantifying it, I don't know. Best coach, powerlifting watch. They put up, the best coach. My friend Swede won it 2017. I'd like to win that soon. I
Okay,
think
cool.
I can. We got in England who's gonna squat 1,000. It's pretty. Yeah, we're getting it.
Jesus.
There's some phenomenal girls on the team. I'm getting a lot of. I
Yeah.
signed on a guy today with a 881 squat. I mean, we're doing it. It's gonna happen.
Yeah.
And the
That's
trick is
awesome.
to keep them from getting hurt. If they stay uninjured, they'll keep getting stronger. So I have a
Yeah.
PT that works on my team. I have a nutritionist. Basically what I did was hire everybody from my team. It's all mine basically.
Mm.
But what I do is hire people that did things. I looked back on my career and said, what helped me? That I hired
Yeah.
guys that did this stuff for me. I don't really know a ton about injuries. It's not I don't
Mhm.
care. I've really never been injured, so it's not something I think a lot about. My diet was established when I eat the same way as I did when I was 13. My diet's been the same for the
Mhm.
last however many years that is, 27 years. So for me, I hired on guys that could do that for me better than I could. And that's
Yeah.
part of coaching too. Is you have to realize the things that you can't do. You can't be great at everything, and so I appealed to that for me. I had a bunch of coaches under me that have learned. My best friend Mark Wood, shout out. He does a lot of my coaching too. He understands technique. He's a much smarter guy than I am, and so he's helped out a ton. So it's tough to keep control. And you always have people quitting and want to go play westside, and do reverse band presses with 300 pounds. But
Mhm.
at the same time, I've been able to keep most of my team because we keep getting better and better and better. And I coach the same way that I was coached. I'm not nice. I'll yell at you. I'll tell you you're a fucking asshole. I'll tell you you suck. Same way I was. I was never told I was good. Louis never told
Yeah.
me I was good. You know what I mean?
You know what's funny about that actually is there was a paper that came out. I can't remember when it was. I actually wrote about it. I do some research reviews and I wrote about it a while back. But they were looking at differences in coaching styles and beginners. They found that essentially beginners need a lot more positive reinforcement,
Yes.
where like intermediate and advanced actually hate it and they
Yes.
don't do as well. Like they need
Right.
more like constructive criticism and a lot
Right.
more direct.
Yep.
Um, Cause yeah, like I definitely know if I get out from under the squat bar and I feel like I missed something and I look to my buddy and he's like, "Oh no, you did great." I'm like, "Bro, what are you a
Yeah.
bitch? Like what the fuck are you talking? Like why are you coming to me like
That
that?"
sucks. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Right.
weird.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly.
So that makes a lot of sense.
See, what
Um,
I sort of done is I found a way to everybody does the same program. The same stuff will work for everybody. The
mhm,
variance from human to human is pretty minimal. Now, if we look at the history of strength, who created all the science, it was created in giant groups in Russia. Russians have created most of the science that we use, and it
mhm,
was created in huge groups. And so what that told me was everybody can probably do the same thing. All the numbers are picked from Cleveland chart, so that's taken care of. And that's just going to fill in the blanks. And so I wrote a program. It took me about 7 years to put it together, and it's worked every time. So I have an 80-year-old woman doing it. I have a guy that squats 1,000 doing it, and it
mhm.
works for everybody. So
Well, that's the thing. Like once you find that sort of system that works, like of auto regulating for each individual, and then being able to like fill in those
yeah,
gaps of
yep,
weaknesses and kind of bolster strengths. Uh, I mean, a lot of programs really do look pretty similar.
yeah, oh yeah,
Like
absolutely,
if you strip okay which exercise we're doing, if you strip all that stuff, and you just kind of have the skeleton, it looks
yep,
pretty similar.
yeah, absolutely.
Um,
And it really should.
yeah.
I said a few months ago when I was running kind of funny Instagram posts. I said basically all programs are Westside or Chico, and they sort of are. They sort of all kind of they sort of all kind of look like that, and they should all kind of look similar. The science hasn't changed, so
Mhm,
they really should kind of look that way. So it wasn't a negative thing; it was a positive thing.
mhm,
If the guy's running a programming, it does all sort of look the same, minus some minor nuances. Even if you look at like the stuff that Louis told me is the same stuff that Swede tells me. They share the exact same thoughts on everything. The programs
Yeah.
look a little bit different, but again, it's nuances, it's small stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and it's funny, like the small stuff. A lot of the times that's what really makes a difference in terms of like injury prevention and like
Absolutely.
bolstering some of those weaknesses, especially at the higher levels. So one of the things that I notice, even just kind of from following you on Instagram and stuff like that, is that you seem to have that really hard mentality, which is pretty reminiscent of like Westside, where everyone is kind of
Yeah.
like that no bullshit sort of attitude. Um, I think as an athlete, that's really useful because you like you said earlier about competition. If you fuck up a squat or whatever, it's like there is no sort of victim mentality. It's just like anytime something bad happens, it's almost like this is my fault. What do I need to do to move forward?
Right.
And it can be really productive. So, how did you develop that? Like, obviously, it was something that kind of developed organically, but
Yep.
how did you develop that? And do you have any advice to someone who maybe didn't have as difficult of kind of an upbringing to
Sure.
kind of get to that headspace?
You sort of just have to learn it over time. And that's the hard part. You have to suck in order to be good. There has to be a point of time where you sort of have to give yourself to that. Then I'm going to suck for a while and I'm going to learn. The problem is that when people suck, they say, "Okay, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. I hate feeling like I'm doing terribly at this. I'm going to quit." But that's the time where you need to do the best. Now, for me, my father was hard on us growing up. He expected me to be the best. When I made All State in football my senior year, he goes, "Where are you ranking the other 49 states?" Like it's sort of how he always was. Like so,
Yeah.
I was pushed pretty hard from a very very early age, and then my coaches, all the way through, always pushed me hard, and so I became very used to it. It became a very 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 good, a very 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 good, good interest to West Side. Like my football coaches weren't radically different than Louis. It was kind of the same shit.
Mhm.
But if you the Muhammad Ali autobiography is a great way to learn about mindset stuff, and a lot of stuff that I say and do is from that, basically. But it takes time. It takes a lot of losing and failing to be good. And you have to be okay with that. And it's hard and it sucks and it's hard. It's hard to not be the best, but you have to be okay with that for a while, and keep working through that. And so when I went to Westside, I was sure I was going to be the best. I knew I was going to be the best, and I was able to be okay with that and say, okay, I'm just gonna work harder than everybody else. I might not be the best, I might be the strongest, but I'll work harder. And so you have to find ways around it like that. Well, maybe I wasn't the strongest, but I did too much than him, and stuff like that.
Mhm.
That's how I do it.
Yeah, like finding those little daily wins.
Yeah, daily wins. That's it
Yeah.
right there. Yes. Yep.
Yeah,
And it's
it's
not always
crazy.
gonna be great.
Yeah. No, and it's crazy how important that is. Like, a lot of the times I'll tell my lifters, like, you should aim to PR pretty much every session from like after week one,
Yep.
because week one is usually the light intro stuff. Then I'm like, you should be hitting a PR every single session. And they're
The
like,
hard
really?
part
Like,
with
what do you
that
mean?
though is fatigue. Is that build of fatigue. So
Well,
as we're doing it,
what I mean by that is I don't necessarily mean like a
numbers.
new max. It's
Yeah.
like you should be hitting a PR like, hey, I lifted this for the same number of reps,
Yes.
but it was
Yes.
smoother, it was
Absolutely.
faster, I had better technique,
Yep, absolutely.
or
That's everything.
I hit a rep PR, or I was able to do more pull-ups. So on my accessories, so like, but if you're always able to
Right.
find those areas where it's
Even
like,
if I was more confident than I was last time.
yeah,
It can be
exactly.
very, very small stuff, and that's absolutely 100% true.
Yeah, like I'm a really, really big believer of that because then it just motivates the hell out of you, and you're like, "Fuck,
Oh,
what can I do? What
absolutely.
can I do? What can I do? Like, what
Absolutely.
else can I do?" And then like those little things that mean essentially nothing stack up, and now at the end of
Eventually
your
mean a lot.
program, you're hitting
Right,
like a
right, right.
30-pound PR at the end of your comp
Right.
cycle, right? So that's awesome, man.
Yeah, little
Um,
goal. That's a big thing too. Yeah, like for me, my goal from day one was to be the best in the world. But I had a million little goals before that I had to hit, and I was able to
yeah,
do it pretty well. Even now I'm constantly setting goals. Like my goal for 40 years old was 20 pull-ups. No, I did it the day after I turned 40, so now I need a new goal. But I was able to hit 20 pull-ups the other day for the first time ever.
how much do you
And that's
weigh?
how I keep getting better.
How much do you weigh?
255.
That's pretty good, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm old too. I'm old, so like
Yeah,
it's cool to still be doing stuff I've never done.
yeah.
Last year at 39, I self unracked 550, 555 and bench it, just missed 570 with a self unrack, and that was a big thing too. I want to keep getting better. I don't think age should slow
Mhm.
me down. I think I can keep getting better. as long as they stay healthy and make good choices. And now making
Yeah.
choices is sort of ingrained in my brain at this point, so it's pretty easy.
That's awesome. And like obviously you get so much smarter and so much wiser like as you age where it's
Oh,
like
it's crazy.
you're not as strong, but you can probably hit new PRs just
Absolutely.
because you're more intelligent
Being
about how
smart,
you
yeah,
approach it. Yeah.
absolutely.
So that's wild. Oh man, there was something I wanted to ask as a follow-up. Oh, right. When you were talking about goals, um, I know a lot of people who talk about like they write down their goals and they're like, I write down my big goals every single day,
Yeah,
and then I read them, and it's like I understand that, but at the same time, for me, I've always kind of been almost the opposite. Like I'll write down a goal and then I never look at it again
mhm,
because it's almost like it's too big. You know what I mean?
right, right,
Like one of my goals is I eventually want to squat 1,000, and so to do that, I'll probably have to get up to about 370 body weight. Right? I'm
yep,
260 right now,
yep.
and like that's a lot. And if I
That's
think
tough.
about that, I'm like, fuck, man, that's like 7 more years or some nonsense. You know?
Right.
But if I'm just like, okay, you know what? I'm gonna go in and I just want to make sure that I smoke all my sets today.
Yep.
Like those are kind of the goals that I set,
Absolutely.
or else I just don't even get motivated, because
Right.
it's like, dude, what am I don't have any rewards for what,
Right.
7 years,
Right.
really?
Right.
Like hell no.
Right.
Whereas if I go in today and I have that like, hey man, I just want to really smoke these couple sets. I really, really want to do a really good job with that without breaking down.
Right.
I want to
Right.
go home. I want to make sure that I'm in bed at this time, making sure that I'm
Right.
eating all my foods. Like those are all those little wins.
Those little
And
wins. That's
and I
everything.
I think people really underestimate the value of like stacking
Right.
up those tiny wins.
Right.
You
And
know?
you have to have a plan too. Like
Mhm.
if you set a goal but don't have a plan, it's just a dream. You know, what I mean, I can say I want to make $1 billion this year, and
Yeah.
when somebody says how you do that, I say I don't know. Then it's not a plan. It's a dream. It's a wild dream. You know. And another thing too with
Yeah.
mindset is you have to have a positive mindset. Like I hear lifters all the time say, "Well, I suck at this or I suck at that." This is why you suck at it because you say you suck at it. I did it
Yeah.
to myself. Like so, over the last year, I've been very very I've stopped doing a lot of things I was doing to be very strong. You obviously know what I'm talking about. And
Mhm.
I've cut, I'm on basically a TRT dose now, and so I sort of had it in my brain that my bench press was going to fall off, and it did. But you know, it didn't. My squat and deadlift because it wasn't in my head. So you always have to be,
Yeah.
positive. You never. I go crazy when I lifters say I suck today or I suck at this. No, you suck at it because you think you suck at it. You have that ingrained in your brain. Always believe you're great. I always tell people whenever I walk in a room, I assume I'm the strongest guy in there. Am I always? I don't know. But if you ask me, yeah, I am.
Yeah.
I was doing a seminar with that sweet Brandon Lilly, and one of the kids asked, "Who's the strongest of you three?" And all three of our hands went up. I mean, that's how you have to think. You have to believe in
Yeah.
yourself,
Yeah.
and that's the thing I've always been able to do. I believe in myself, 100%. Back when
Yeah.
I was, the best in the world, I believed I was the best in the world. There was no question in my mind.
Yeah.
It's not like if you said who's the best, I was going to say somebody else. I was going to say me. Well,
Yeah, you kind of have to. I mean, like even when I was boxing, like if you go in there and you're like, "Oh man, I don't know,"
yeah, you
like
get head fucking knocked
you're in
off.
for a rough night, man. You're in
Right,
for a rough night.
right,
And you have
right.
like what was your best squat? It was like something
1060,
ridiculous. Yeah, it's
1060.
like you have 1060 on your back and you're
Yeah.
like, "I don't know if I can do this." It's like, dude,
Did you ever hear the
like
story? What happened on the squat?
I don't
1060.
know.
Oh, it's a good story. So that day, I had an eviction notice on my house. I had bought an
Oh,
expensive house,
I
and
did hear
so
this. Yeah,
my,
yeah,
my
yeah.
girlfriend talked me into buying this fucking crazy house with her, and I was like, oh god, I don't know. And she said, we can afford it. You make so much money competing. And I was like, oh god, I don't know. So I get an eviction notice, and I was like, probably 27. I had no business owning a house, and and so I had to win that day. So I opened up about 1,000, I think 1,000, maybe 1,020, we'll say, and crushed that. I felt great. Went to 1060, and I took it out a little bit. I took it out a little bit higher than I wanted to, and I fell forward with it. So I fell into the racks, and they had to pick it up off me. And the plates were a few inches off the floor. And I'd basically done a good morning like that with the weights. And so I
Yeah.
was curled over. They pulled the 1060 off me, put it back up. And Chuck V had done my knee wraps that day, and they felt like my kneecap was going to explode. And so I was like, everyone okay? And everyone was like, yeah, we're all right. I was like, I want to take it again. And Louis like, what? I was like, I want to take it again. and they were like, "You can't." And I was like, "Show me the rule book where it says I can't." They're like, "Well, you can, but," I was like, "Just put it back on and let me fucking do it." So I did it, and I was squatting down with it. It felt okay. I hit the hole and started coming back up, and all of a sudden my rib popped out of place, and I tore all the cartilage in my side of my rib, down my
Oh,
side, my serratus. And I still did it. I still fought all the way up and did it. And I racked it, and then I fainted.
Jesus.
Yeah, it was probably
That's such a
so what
gangster move.
happened. I dumped the weight. Between the time
Yeah.
I dumped the weight and when I actually did it, it was probably 30 seconds at the most. And so it
Oh,
was
for real.
not one of the smarter things I've done.
Jesus.
But yeah, I did it.
That's
Yeah,
insane, man.
did a lot of crazy shit like
Insane.
that back then. Yeah,
I remember there was a recent interview, and this is actually a story that I thought you were going to tell me now. There's a recent interview that Louis did, and he talked about you showing up real late to a meet
yeah,
and then just opening cold with
yeah.
like
I did
700 or 800 on the bar, and I was just like, "What the fuck?" Like,
900. Yeah. So what
beyond a
happened
certain
that day
point,
was,
that's
let me tell you,
insane.
because people always ask me why I was late. So I went to breakfast that morning with everybody, and I asked John Stafford. Now John Stafford's a subject to a lot of my stories because him and I got pretty close at Westside. And so I go, "Hey, what time are you going to the comp?" He's like, "I don't know, maybe one ish." I was like, "Okay." And so I assumed I had to be there at one because he was competing too. And so I showed up at noon. I showed up an hour early, just get ready and warm up and foam roll and all that stuff. So I showed up an hour early. I walked in the room like everybody was warming up. I'm like, "What the fuck?" And John Stafford was there. I go, "John, what the fuck?" He goes, "I didn't know." I'm like, "Why did you say I don't know instead of tell me one?" He's like, "Sorry." And so I go, "Louis, how much time do we have?" He's like, "You got to get out there right now." And I was like, "Fuck!" And so they had I think 750 on the bar, and so I threw 900 on it. I did a single, then I went out and squatted 1,003 for the world record.
That's so bananas, man.
But I had to, I had to, and that was a
Yeah,
big thing too. Is that you know my whole life, at that time was based upon winning comps. If I didn't win, I wasn't getting paid. So
yeah,
it was very, very important that I won.
yeah, and that's one of the reasons why, like in my opinion, you see a lot of like Russians and why they're so much better than a lot of other
Absolutely,
athletes because of that mentality. It's like
it
that's
has to be.
actually their life.
Mhm,
That's their lifestyle. Like that's
mhm.
their livelihood. That's their income. That's how they provide for their
Absolutely,
family. So the level of motivation is just so much higher
yes,
than someone here who has an easier out because they have a job. They have all this other stuff. They're just like, oh well, this is something I do for fun,
right,
and I mean, I'm not hating on that. Like people are going to do it for the reasons they want, but at the
right,
same time, it's like there's a definitive line in the
right.
sand where you
Right.
can see a big
You and I are
difference.
talking the same language, right? I don't. I can't coach you. I can do it. I can do it one to one. Like here,
Mhm.
I honestly train very few powerlifters. I train mostly triathletes, CrossFitters, stuff like that, and I'm able to do it in person. But when I'm on my online team, which is my baby, like if you're not doing what I want you to do and you're here to have fun, you're on the wrong fucking team. I'm
Yeah,
super, super, super competitive to the point where it's not always good. I get myself that brain, and it makes it hard for me to do day to day things. Like when I have a guy
yeah,
competing on my team, I can't think about anything else. I have to be with him mentally, and so
yeah,
it causes some problems here and there. But it's me. That's what you get. So
yeah. Well, that just kind of brings up another point. Um, I guess that I wanted to bring touch on is balance. Like a lot of the times people talk about balance. They're like, you need balance, you need a balanced life, you need this and that, and like on the one hand, like if you look at balance as like let's say a spectrum, right? So this is like the most extreme you can get, and this is the least extreme you can get, right? A lot of times people think balance is like right in the center,
no,
but
right?
oftentimes like you got to be right at the end of that,
Yep.
like really really close to that
Yep.
extreme, but then balance out the rest of your life so that becomes your
Right.
balance almost.
Right. Right.
And
Right.
so you're so off kilter, but because you have set up your lifestyle to like allow you to sleep 10 hours a day, you have a massage therapist or
Yep.
whatever other, therapists that work on you, like it's it's pretty extreme. So
Yep.
like, do you ever think about balance in your life? No?
I'm completely fine with no balance in my life. I'm completely okay
Uh,
with that. Like for me,
yeah.
like especially when I was over in Ohio, there was no balance. It was it's all I did, all I thought about. It was my entire
Yeah.
day. Like they say, don't put all your eggs in one basket. But for me being successful, they all had to be in one basket. You know,
Mm,
if I had other options, I probably would have taken them. You know what I mean? For me, it
mm.
was this or nothing. You know, it was win, it was be the best or nothing. I'm not sure what I had no backup plan. I'm not sure what it was. You know, so it
Yeah.
had to work. You know, at least in my mind, so I thought if I have no backup plan, it's basically win and be the best or be homeless. And so for
Yeah.
me, balance of course is great and stuff like that, and whatever,
Mhm.
whatever. People tell me all the time, I need to find more balance, but I don't really care about anything else. You know, I want to be the best at this. I don't need to be the best fucking hiker. I don't need the best fucking, you know, whatever. This is it. This is all I want to
Yeah.
do, and I'm fine with this being the only thing in my life. I'm totally fine with that. Other than my daughter, of course.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people have a hard time with that as well. Like when they're faced with someone who's like so extreme and so
Right.
serious, like it's so abnormal that
It's
people
so
just don't
weird.
know what to do. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like
Right.
because I don't know. To me, like I get that because that's kind of what I'm trying to work towards, right? And so I'm having to lay down some sacrifice. I'm having to do all that stuff, and eventually, hopefully, I'll get somewhere really cool. But if someone's who's just, like they have a family and they just kind of are doing their thing,
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know how it appears from the outside, but it must seem like fucking bananas to them. That's for sure.
Bizarre. Right.
Uh,
My people think I'm
yeah.
fucking insane. You know, and I am. That's okay.
Mhm.
More of that. You know.
Yeah. Well, it's funny actually how you said about giving yourself different options, right? Because one of the things, so even since I've been back in Calgary, like I haven't seen my friends, like I haven't been going out, and I'm just not even going to. And I kind of set like a weird rule for myself that I'm not going to have friends in the same city anymore. I'll just call my friends, and they'll be in another city, and that's all good. Because the one thing that I realized was like just so I had a squat session today, and it was pretty shitty, like in the sense of it was super fucking hard. And it's like, okay, well, would I rather be doing that, or would I rather go out on the patio, really nice weather,
Yeah.
with like some friends and like a really hot girl? It's like
Right.
obviously I'd rather do that.
Right. Of course. Of
And I
course.
think the more that you give yourself these, like, I don't want to call them rewards, but yeah, the more you let yourself be involved in that world,
Mhm.
the more you're like, man, fuck that. I don't want to go back to that. That
Right.
sucks,
Right. Right.
And it's yeah, it's tough because like at least for me, I don't know if there would be a good balance. I don't know if I would be able to kind of even just
Right.
once a week go out and do that sort of stuff because I
That's what I do.
honestly think that it would
That's
like
how I do it.
just completely derail me.
It might actually work. That's how I sort of always have done it. Like Monday
Yeah,
through Friday, I'm like I train Saturday, I train today. Saturday we go for beers. You know, Saturday we go for beers. I met a girl.
yeah,
We're gonna have some drinks tonight. You know, so I find myself it's a lot easier to do if you're one day a week where you let go a little bit. And I've been
hmm,
doing it for as long as I can remember. You know, and I've always been kind of known as a wild party animal, but I'm not. It's one day a week. You know,
yeah,
that's when people see me at the bar. I'll have a good time. I'll do it.
yeah.
You know, not 40 now, but when I was younger, you know, I'd go out and party hard one day a week, and then Sunday morning I'd be right back to it, right back on schedule. So I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing, you know, honestly. You gotta
Yeah.
celebrate it a little bit, right?
Yeah, no, that's fair. That's that kind of weird balance that people have to find. And again, when I say balance, I don't necessarily mean like a 50-50 neutral or
Yeah.
anything like that. It's just whatever's going to work for you to hit those targets.
For me
Um,
it's like 97% and 3%, you know?
yeah, yeah, exactly. So one of the crazy things that I want to talk about as well um, was the fact that you have several world records that came after your stroke, which is just fucking bananas to me. Like that was something where I was like, I remember reading up on you and being like, okay, like you broke these records, you did this, you did this, you did this, and like, um, and then I remember after I heard that, I was like, what? Like you couldn't? I remember you saying you couldn't grab a towel with your
Nope.
hand,
I'm with
but
barbell.
you were still able to bench
Yeah.
like four
455.
something.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was like, what? How the fuck does that work? And like, how did that whole process come about? Where you're just like, nah, I'll be back.
It took a while actually. I won't lie, it took a long time.
Yeah,
After that happened, I was sort of it really brought me off my high horse. You know what I mean? Like I had
yeah.
a stroke in 2010. I didn't compete. I didn't do my first comp back for 2013. It's not like I was like training the entire time. Like I was pretty sure I was done. And then I was like, okay, I can apply my process, to something else. And so I got a job at a gym, selling gym memberships. Pretty normal day, normal job. I said, okay, I'm going to get here and I'll work my way up to the top. So within 2 months, I was regional manager, and they would give the managers a few hours a day to train together, tan, grab some food, stuff like that. And so everybody was in there deadlifting. I'm like, Greg, come show us how to deadlift. I'm like, I don't know. They're like, we know who you are. We know you know how to deadlift. But the thing about it was is that my right hand, I couldn't grab a bar. I couldn't hold onto a bar, and so I could work to like 405. So eventually they talked me into it. And I was like, okay, I'll show you the 225. And I realized at that point, this is probably about a year after the stroke, I realized I could grab the bar. So I went 225, 315, 405, 495. Then I went 675, 585, and 675. And I was like, oh shit, I got it. I still got this. And I was still routinely benching 500 plus pounds. And so I went in the office where the big dog was, the big boss man. And I was like, hey man, I quit. He's like, what the fuck? He was like, I quit. He's like, you're the hardest working guy I've ever had. What do you mean you quit? I'm moving back to Maine. I gotta start powerlifting again. The guy's like, do it here. I was like, nah, I'm good. I want to start the process where I started in the first place. So I moved back
Yeah.
here. I started training. And it was really tough at first. People don't understand the difference between geared lifting and raw lifting. It's huge. It's major. Just the mechanics and the way we train. And so I went right back in training westside, and it wasn't working. My body was so beat up. I couldn't handle it. I couldn't walk. My hips were so messed up. And so I called Brandon Lilly, and he was like, how many raw lifters were there at Westside? I was like, none. He was exactly. So he sent me over his program. I started running that. It was so hard because of all the volume. I had never really done that kind of volume before. And so, but as soon as I started doing it, I was watching my body change. And eventually in 2013, I believe, I came back into Raw, and I totaled 2,000 in my first comp. I squatted 750, I benched 500,
Hmm.
and I deadlifted 750. And at that point, I was like, holy shit, I'm back. I can do this again. And so it was working, from that. Basically, that was my starting point, was 2000. And, I think probably had I gone into Raw in my 20s, I probably still would have been the best on the planet, honestly. I was a very, very
Hmm.
good raw lifter. I squatted 719. Um, so, yeah, I mean, it was a process like everything else. I realized I was going to suck at first and work my way up. So I did.
Hmm.
I couldn't squat 400 pounds raw when I
Yeah.
first started. I probably could, but mechanically, I couldn't get down there. I was using that really
Yeah.
wide stance and trying to sit back into it, and it wasn't working. So I started watching, the raw guys lifting. Like, that looks totally different than what I'm doing. So I
Yeah.
started copying it, and it worked.
Well, I looked it up, and I don't know if it's still valid, but at least at one point you were the best raw lifter and equipped lifter combined. Like
Probably.
no one's had a higher combined total in raw and
I bet.
equipped.
I bet it's true. I bet it's still true. Maybe
Yeah.
maybe Brandon Lilly.
I don't think so.
Maybe
Unless
not. I
unless
don't know.
something changed. I remember reading that recently, like before when I was doing a little bit of research on you, and so I was like, holy shit! Like I didn't know
Matt,
that.
Matt
That's pretty
Wenning.
bananas.
Matt Wenning has. Matt Wenning's done more.
Oh, okay.
It's funny though,
No,
the
I
difference.
like for your weight class though.
Oh yeah, no, I don't think anybody's even close. Honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you lifted that 675, did you go after and quit right away?
No, the thing about it was the squat. I realized so after I had the stroke, I was like, I don't know how to squat anymore. I fucking I hate squatting. I
Yeah.
absolutely hate it. So I was like, I'm gonna bodybuild. So I was doing like half squats, leg presses, stuff like
Yeah.
that. And then when I went back into half squat again, that's when the real problem started. You know.
Oh, okay.
So it
Yeah.
really took probably 2 years to learn how to squat. After that, it's a process. Those are people have to understand. It doesn't happen right away. It's a process, and I love the process. And I think that's what separates me. I love that. I love sucking. It was fun for me. It's like I suck finally. This is great. I have
Yeah.
a place to work out from. Where one of the best in the world. It's like, how do you work out from that? How do I do any more than that? So I had
Yeah.
it was nice to feel like I had something to actually work on, and so I enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, they always say it's harder to become, or it's harder to stay the champ than become the champ because you're just not
Absolutely,
as
not a
hungry.
question.
Um, okay, so one question: what's one opinion you have on training that isn't necessarily like super well established, or maybe it goes against the grain a little bit, but you feel confident kind of putting your name on that and being like, you know what, even though this isn't necessarily validated, maybe I don't understand the mechanisms, I really believe this to be true.
Um, it may be validated, but I think the first part of this process has to be looking like a lifter. So that's what I did when I was a kid. I said, okay, I'm not as good as these guys, but I want to look like them. And so I spent 7 years building muscle, kind of pseudo bodybuilding type stuff. And when I went into my first comp, I won best lifter. I broke every state record at 220. But I was very, very muscular. I had a ton of muscle, and so I think that needs to be your first step is building muscle mass before you even go into it. And that goes with strongman, that goes with CrossFit, and it's something that people don't want to do because it's hard, it sucks. There's not a ton of instant gratification from it, but that has to be your first process. Part of the process has to be to learn how to eat. You eat sufficient calories, build that mass up, strengthen that lower back. So you have to think about that before you actually do go into training. I believe. As opposed to,
Hmm.
and what I'm seeing now is like all these underdeveloped lifters doing Westside training. And the first question I always ask them is, "What is different about you than the guys there?" I go, "Well, those guys are a lot bigger." Yeah, exactly. That's what you need to do first.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And I actually 100% agree. Like I even wrote an article literally on why powerlifters should train more like bodybuilders.
There you go.
You look
Yeah,
you look at a lot of the old school powerlifters and they all look
yeah.
like bodybuilders,
They look like bodybuilders,
like
right?
Ed Cohen and like Bill Kazmaier, all those
Yeah.
dudes,
Oh
like
yeah.
they're all just
That's their
yoked and
shit,
you're like,
right?
Jesus Christ. And then nowadays everyone's trying to like cut weight and go to the lower weight class. It's like, dude, you're 6 foot tall, man. You don't need
Right.
to weigh 145 pounds,
Yeah, it's not gonna help
you
you.
know?
You're gonna die.
Yeah.
Yeah, the sport's changed a lot. It's just
Mhm.
grown a lot. So a lot more normal people are involved with it than when
Yeah.
I was coming. Everyone involved in sport when I was coming was a fucking psychopath. And
Yeah.
so it was easier for me to navigate around in that world than it is now, where we just this overflow of information. Everybody thinks they're great, and it's like, you know,
Yeah.
and not quite understanding that this is a physiological process. This is not an egotistical journey into you being the best you can be. This is all happening. This is all going to happen in stages. Throughout. And it's going to take 5 years before you're even competitive.
Yeah.
But nobody wants to hear that.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. So, what's one last question since we're kind of coming up on that hour mark? What's one piece of advice that you'd give the listeners?
Just pretty much the same thing I just said. It's always sort of, if you read my posts and stuff, it's sort of all kind of along the same line. That
Mhm.
it's going to take time. It's not going to be a fast process. Learn technique, learn how to build muscle. People are so obsessed with like this little minute aspects of it. What kind of knee wraps are you wearing? What kind of wrist
Yeah,
straps? I don't fucking know. I found them on the floor somewhere. It's not about what you're wearing. If you can buy it, if it's something you can purchase, it's not going to help you that much. What's going to help you is this. Your
yeah,
mindset is everything, and that's going to be the driving force. It's sort of either you got it or you don't. And you can learn it for sure, but it's going to take a long time to figure out how to you
mhm,
know navigate around contests, how to work your way up from local, international, into world, if that's your goal, of course.
mhm.
Just that it's going to take time. I have a lot of people sign up for my team. The last a month, nothing's really happening, and they're gone. You're not
Yeah,
going to get better that way. If you're jumping from then I see them jump into like a conjugate style program. In 2 weeks, they're hitting huge PRs. I'm like, yeah, you just did a fucking peak. We were going to do that too before the comp. And then nothing ever happens
yeah,
again. But it's gonna take time. It's
yeah.
gonna it's gonna be a long process, and just gear up for it.
No, 100%. Couldn't agree more. And I actually, that reminded me because I pulled up your post right now. Saw it earlier today, and I laughed my ass off. So I'll read it now. It's a program without accountability is like a dick without balls.
Damn right, it don't work. Just kind of flapping
A hundred
around, you
percent.
know.
Yeah. That's awesome, man. So where can the listeners find you if they want to know more about you? They want to see where
Sure,
you're at, maybe even get some.
absolutely. My Instagram is Big Poppy Panora. I coach through Train Heroic, so if you want to get a hold of me on Train Heroic, go to the website trainheroic.com. You can find me there, sign up there, hit me up, throw me a text message, an email, whatever, instant message, direct a DM. Just get a hold of me. I'll talk about it with you. I'll tell you how we do this, why we do what we do. I can answer any question you have. So love to hear from you guys.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks so much for joining us. Really,
Thank
really
you.
appreciate it.
That was a blast. Thank you.
Yeah, it was really great chatting. Hey guys, thanks so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed the episode and took a lot from it that you can apply to your own situation to see much better results. I just have one quick personal favor to ask of you. Please make sure you subscribe and leave me a 5-star rating on whatever podcast platform you're using. When you do this, it helps me get better at producing content and increases my exposure so I can continue putting out high quality information for you guys. Next, I want to extend a personal invitation to shoot me a DM on Instagram at Stacked Strength. I'll help you troubleshoot anything you need. This is literally an invitation to connect with me directly, so make sure you head on over and jump into my DMs. All right, guys, thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you next time.